Hello, my name is Jerry Paz. I'd like to welcome you to a historical discussion about the George Paz family tree. On behalf of my sister Claire Paz, my sister Conchita Paz, and my brother Richard Paz, we'd like to welcome you to our discussion over a cup of coffee about George Paz and the family and what he's meant to the Mesilla Valley. Hello, my name is Jerry Paz. I'm the 8th child of George and Angela Paz's 12 children.
And I am Conchita Paz. I am child number 3 of George and Angela Paz.
And I'm Richard Paz, and I'm the second oldest of 12 children of George and Angela Paz.
And I'm Claire Paz Dawson, and I'm the number 6 child of George and Angela Paz.
Thank you for today. We're here to share a story about the George and Angela Paz family. We have 12 children involved here, but it goes way back, way back. Paz family has deep pioneering roots here in Las Cruces, and so we would like to share some of that story of the fabric of our family with you today. And that story starts several years ago at the founding of our state, and it really begins with a young man. His name was Santos Paz, and Santos Paz is the great grandfather of George Paz, my father, and Santos. He came and lived here in the Mesilla Valley back in the 1800s, born in 1830 or so. And so he was living in this valley when the Republic of Texas won their independence from Mexico. And so at that time, the boundary of the Texas border with Mexico was the Rio Grande River, and that was kind of disputed at the time with Mexico, but that's what Texas claimed up to. And so that would have put Santos into Texas at that point, being on the east side of the Rio Grande River. Subsequent to that, Texas became annexed into the United States, and Santos then became a United States citizen as a part of that. But this area was in dispute. Again, Mexico thought that the border was at the Nueces River there in Texas, around the Austin area, but Texas claimed it was up to the Rio Grande. So that was what the whole Mexican-American War was all about the disputed territory. And so the United States went to war with Mexico and invaded Mexico City, and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed into effect at that time. So the Rio Grande, or the whole southern part of California, Arizona, even all the way up into Utah, became part of United States after the end of the war. But a funny thing happened here in Las Cruces. The boundary that occurred was established north of Las Cruces in Dona Ana. And so when you look at that was the southern boundary of the United States, and Las Cruces ended up back in Mexico. So if you think about Santos, he's sitting there living here in the Mesilla Valley. He was Texan, and then he became, he was born Mexican, then became Texan, then became United States citizen, and after the war he was thrown back into Mexico. And I think the United States figured there was an error in the mapping that occurred in New York City, and so rather than go back to war with Mexico, they just purchased it outright. It's called the Gadsden Purchase, and that moved the boundary down to El Paso. A few years later, during the 1860s, of course, the Civil War occurred, And the Civil War, then the Texas Confederacy came up and fought at the Battle of Mesilla there at Fort Fillmore. And they won. And then they proceeded up to Fort Craig, where they won the Battle of Valverde. And so the whole southern part of New Mexico and Arizona became part of the Confederate state of Arizona, and Mesilla was the capital. Of course, then the Confederacy went up to Glorieta near Santa Fe. They got their tail kicked, and then they ended up becoming back into the Union. So again, this guy Santos, he's born Mexican, he then became Texan, then he became U.S. citizen, then he got thrown back into Mexico, and then he got put back in the United States. But then he was part of the Arizona Confederacy, which seceded from the Union, and then he became a part of the New Mexico Territory after the Civil War. And so he never moved. He never changed addresses. The boundary was moving all over him. I just don't ever know where he paid his taxes. But it illustrates the shifting borders that occurred here in the Mesilla Valley and how those borders were moving around the livelihoods of people who were probably poor, probably just trying to work for a living, and wondering who is governing us today. I think that as that border was shifting, I can imagine what he was going through at that time. So the founding of New Mexico included the Paz family that was all a part of that. Subsequent to that, in the first territorial census of 1870 is when Santos Paz appears in that census. And he had a little son. His son was named Diego. And so Diego then became the grandfather of George Paz. And we have a family tree here to illustrate that point. So what we're looking at in the family tree is Santos Paz was married to a Maria Paz, and they had their son, Diego Paz. Diego Paz fell in love and married a young lady whose name was Estefana Diaz. And she is the daughter of Angel Diaz and Apolonia Diaz. And so these two lovebirds were married. They then had a child, and that child was Gabriel Paz. Unfortunately, Estefana Diaz died in childbirth. And so Diego was left to raise Gabriel by himself, and that's where Grandma stepped in to help. Apolonia Diaz, for all intents and purposes, was Gabriel Paz's mother. She adopted him, she raised him as her own, and she cared for him and took care of him. So she also was a property owner in downtown Las Cruces. So it is her property because Gabriel was the only child of her daughter. Gabriel inherited the property, the Church Street property downtown Las Cruces that we all know of. And that belonged to Apolonia Diaz, and now it belonged to Gabriel Paz. So Gabriel, when we think of the Paz family history, we all go back to Gabriel Paz because he seemed to be the patriarch of the family. He's the center of all the stories that we have. And Gabriel Paz met a young lady. Her name was Francisca Calderon, and she came from Durango, Mexico, and she was a kind of an orphan child, and her mother died again at a young age, and her father then could not take care of him, and she was adopted out into a family who really wasn't that nice to her. And so that family said they would teach her piano and treat her like a daughter, but in reality they didn't. They treated her more like a servant. And so she was the stepchild of this family, and she was treated as such. And so her sister, her stepsister, saw the inequity of that and helped her to get free from that family. And she moved to El Paso and was sort of taken in by this family, this Calderon family. So her name was Margarita Muela, and was her birth name, but she was she took on the name of Francisca Calderon, and so her parents were Jorge Muela and Dona Ana Calderon, and so they then Mamu then, we called her Mamu, and we called our grandfather Gabriel Mampu, and so they were kind of the couple that mom and dad's mother and father that we look to in the Paz family history. And then Gabriel Paz, when he married Mamu Francisca Calderon, they then had 7 children, and so their children consisted of Benny Paz, Uncle Benny. He was a single man all his life. He loved fishing, and Benny Paz was a good sportsman. And then there was Fanny Serna. She married Louis Serna and started that line of the family history, which is the line that the Solars come from. And then there was Carmen Anglakowski. She married Albert Anglakowski, and he was an engineer out at White Sands, and they had a daughter, Arlene. And then from there, we had Gabe Paz married Lorraine Kirsch, and they had a very large family from there. Then we had Raymond Paz. Raymond Paz was an optometrist. He was a World War II veteran and had a large family also that were very close to the George Paz family. And then we had my dad, George Paz. Again, he had 12 kids. And then we had, from there we had Eddie Paz, Edward Paz, took on the name of Mamu's boyfriend before she married Gabriel. She had a soft spot in her heart for this young man named Eddie, and so she named Uncle Eddie after the boyfriend, and so now one of our brothers is named Eddie after that. So that boyfriend, man, he's remembered a long time. Francisca then had 2 children, Maria and Gabriel, the first, and those 2 children died at a young age, very young age, and so they didn't live very long. And so that's kind of the history of Gabriel Paz, who was again our patriarch that we look to, and then which is my father's father. And we had and Mamu Francisca Calderon Paz, and she was a very strong-willed woman. She ruled that house pretty tightly, and we all loved her. And I think Concha's going to share a little bit about the next phase of the George Paz era.
So, Dad grew up on Church Street, and his father was a printer with Bronson Printing Company. He, in fact, the whole family was part of the printing business except for it was Raymond. So then Dad went to college over at New Mexico A&M. But during that time he was in college, the war was on, and so he ended up being drafted into the service, and he was in the Army. So during the time of World War II, he was in Europe, and he was a medic in the service, and he followed Patton's army. So he was there to pick up and help deliver first aid to all of the soldiers as he followed that army. He found it to be very hard job. It was really hard for him to see people suffering in that way.
Mostly in France and Germany, right?
Yeah, France and Germany. And then he was there when they opened up or rescued the people from the Dachau concentration camp. And so he saw a lot of the Nazis that were there, as well as the prisoners of war that were still alive. And actually, he didn't really realize that what he saw as far as dead people were, he thought it was maybe some kind of disease or something, until he got to the United States and he heard that was, a lot of genocide that had gone on. So, but he certainly still saw a lot of that activity there while he was in the service. And then after the service, or after the war ended, he came back to New Mexico and went back to New Mexico State. That was that was New Mexico A&M at that time, and finished up college. He ran for student council, so he was on the student council. Engineers Council, where he was in the government for that one. And he had known my mom probably most of his life, or at least a good portion of it. And so she was working at the Dean of Students, and so they used to then go out. And he finished college before she did, and he moved to Odessa, Texas to work for Phillips Petroleum Company. And Mom was finishing up school, so when she finished up, then they went on to get married, and she moved over to Odessa, Texas, where she had my two oldest brothers, George and Richard. So
now, Mom herself was the first in
yes,
her family to graduate from college. She is the only one in her family to graduate from college. She had to defy her father, who didn't want her to go to even high school. And so
That's
it was
right.
Auntie Mickey, right? Auntie Mickey snuck her out of the house
Helped
and helped her to go to high school. And then she enrolled in New Mexico State. And my favorite story of Mom is when she told her father that she was going to go to college. And he said no. And he said, excuse me, Dad, but I'm not here to ask permission. I'm here to just get my clothes and go, because I'm going to college. And so she's a tough lady. She had to step out of the norm, step out of the framework that young Hispanic women were the glass ceilings that existed at that time. She had to step out of that and forge ahead with not a lot of family support.
Yeah.
That was a monumental achievement.
Plus, they didn't have the financial aid that we have these days. So she had to work for every cent, and she had a job there at the Dean of Students, and by the end of the semester, she would have finally paid off that semester. But she had to live very frugally and work to make ends meet, had roommates so that they could share expenses. But that's how she managed to get through.
She always talked about Dad being her a meal ticket. She said, oh, George, he had the GI Bill, and so he ate good, and we always went out to dinner, and she said, boy, I finally could eat. She was a starving student, and Dad had the GI Bill from his war effort, and that really, a lot of soldiers came back from the war and benefited from the GI Bill at the time.
Then I'm Richard, the second oldest, and of course my parents moved back to Las Cruces to take up the printing business, And that's what I remember is growing up in printing business, and even at a young age of 7 years old, going into working at the printing shop. And of course, you know, us young kids, all that we could do was sweep the floors and empty the garbage and do all the little tedious work that, you know, the older people didn't have time for. So I spent a lot of my time growing up in the printing shop, while some of my younger brothers and sisters, as we were coming along the line, and the reproduction of children was being done, I remember my older sisters were having to take care of the younger children, and it was how you say, assembly line with everything, whether it was eating our meals, whether it was cleaning house or whatever we happened to be, however we were growing up, everything was in the reproduction business and assembly section. And then of course, you know, I went off and, let's go back, and we started off in 1111 Jet in a 2-bedroom apartment. And then as the family got bigger.
2-bedroom house. It was a house.
Yeah, it was a 2-bedroom house. And as the family grew, then of course we added on the garage into another bedroom, and then later on we had a couple other bedrooms added on the back side of the house, and then we had another dining room added on, and just this house became a really big house to where the whole family.
5 bedrooms.
5 bedrooms and
2
2
bathrooms.
bathrooms and a big dining room. Well, actually, my parents had to end up sleeping in the dining room, from what I remember, because everybody else was taking up. And we were like, 3 to 5 people in each bedroom, a couple bunk beds, and maybe one big bed for all the little kids at one time. So, and then as also, there was a lot of hand-me-downs. The upper people had the new clothes, and then all the clothes was kind of handed down, and until it got worn out, and then of course, then it was still hand-me-downs. I remember getting hand-me-downs from George all the way down until I grew taller than him, and then I was able to get my own clothes. And then the girls, of course, all had new clothes because they were girls. You know, they couldn't wear the boys' clothes. So, but it was a lot of hand-me-down. We all appreciate each other, and we learned to live with each other. And yeah, we had our little fights here and there, but it's surprising how, with such a big family, how we really got along together. And then, of course, you know, as you have the bigger families, we have our own baseball teams on the city block. We had our own football teams, so all the neighbors would, of course, want to come over and join us. You know, we didn't have to have them, but it was good to have bigger teams, and we would take up the whole block and play football or soccer or baseball or whatever it is we did. Neighbors always seemed to join in. And then, of course, on the eating side, I know we always like to say how it took 2 dozen eggs and a pound of bacon and a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk for breakfast, and no leftovers. You know, and Mom always used to cook big pots of soup or beans, and everything was mass produced. It was just so much. So
Dad always prayed that he
was so much that the neighbors would just be awed at how much had to be done. And then, like I say, no leftovers. Everything got eaten up.
Dad always prayed that he could make enough money that he didn't have to declare bankruptcy before dinner.
Well, also, we knew too that when dinner was ready, and we had to go eat or you lost out because there were all these boys ready to eat your portion.
And we were staring over, you sure you want that? If you don't, well, I'll eat it for you.
Yeah, there were vultures hanging over those plates.
So, yeah.
Everything happened. Stepping a little bit back, just wanted to cover that when Mampu, he died at a young age. He died in his 50s. He had a heart attack. And then his health just declined over the course of a few months, and he passed away. And so during that time, he asked Dad to move back after he was a chemical engineer at Phillips Petroleum. He asked Dad, would you move back and help run the business? He was afraid it was going to go under. And so, yeah, Dad came back from Odessa to help run the business and kind of launch it into a new era. You know, a lot of the hand presses were being run obsolete, and so he was having to modernize the equipment. He was having to make a lot of changes to the staff, and that was a rough time to try to get that business out of Dad and on its feet again after Mampu passed away. So that was a change in careers for Dad, and you know, people would visit him. Some of the other engineers that he worked with in Odessa would visit him, and they had risen up the company ladder and did quite well. But Dad loved Las Cruces. He was a part of the community. He was involved in civic organizations. He was involved in different clubs and groups and very church, very centered around their friends, and they got together. And so that gave him a lot of joy in life. And so there was no regrets on Dad's part. Whatever he did 110%. And Mom supported him all the way. And Mom, then she, you know, got her degree and then raised 12 kids. And so, you know, it was a period of time where Mom had that fulfillment as a mother, as a wife, and to raise 12 children, to all succeed in their own right. Mm-hmm. And so Mom was a guiding force behind that. But later, when I was in middle school, Mom decided, hey, I'm going to go work now that I have my degree. And she was eligible for quite a few jobs and did quite well, working for social agencies to help job placement. A lot of people in the Mesilla Valley, Mom helped get jobs. And so that was very fulfilling for her. She taught English as a second language at the Dona Ana branch. And so she was really pretty active. You know, Mom enjoyed working. Mm-hmm. And she started working in her 40s when she started working. And so she worked clear up to 65, and she loved it because it was kind of her career. Mm-hmm. Her career really started in her middle 40s, and she really didn't even want to retire. She enjoyed it so much, and so that was a real success for Mom.
What was unique about her job too is that her office was in the same room as it was giving birth to like 6 of the kids.
Oh, so yeah, she like was, the city office.
The city office became, the old hospital became the city office, and her office was her room giving birth.
Yes.
That was always pretty interesting deja vu experience for her.
At this point, we'd like to take a short break and let you listen to a wonderful Paz Family Reunion song that was produced by Ray and Josie Jaramillo, and also look at a collage of pictures that we've gathered on the George Paz family.
It's PAZ roots, that's you and me. A joyful feeling to be united, to be invited to PAZ. So praise the Lord that we're all here today. name won't fade away. 'Cause PAZ roots are deep, deep, deep roots. Let's give a root for us today. This happy feeling, oh what a feeling. This happy feeling, it's PAZ. Let's all join hands, and you will understand. This family tree means love, as you can see. Once there was Gabriel, married Francisca. We called her Mambo, hey Mambo too. It's George and Raymond, it's Gabe and Benny, their sister Carmen and Fanny too. Our Pa's reunion, a peaceful union. It's PAZ roots, that's you and me. This happy feeling, oh what a feeling. This happy feeling, it's PAZ.
When you look at some of the old historic photos here of Mom and Dad, and you go back to their roots, they're on Church Street. There's those photos of Mampu with beards and costume, in various costumes. And there's pictures of the kids doing acrobatics and in other costumes themselves, because they didn't have TV. They didn't have, they entertained each other, and so they had drama, and they had theater, Club Comico there downtown Las Cruces. They were just involved in comic clubs and just social gatherings to get together as a community and do skits and plays and songs. And boy, that Los Pastores bunch, they could play songs, they can sing, and they could dance.
Yeah.
And they could party, and they had a lot of good times, and that was fun to watch. You know, they just could go and go and go
all night long.
all night long. And those people were just like bunny hopping and parading with the Saints Go Marching In, and you know, Lina Tejada was playing her saxophone. It was almost as big as she was, and you know, she playing her guitar, and just different people playing instruments, and they just had a ball.
All the
Ray
time.
Chavez.
Yeah. They just
Everybody.
had a ball. And it's kind of like us kids that hung back. We never really partied that much like they did. They just tied it on and had a good time. And that friendship built a whole community here in Las Cruces. And that was neat to be a part of. You know, sadly, many of them are gone, but those who are left, man, they were left with some good memories.
So Bobby Provencio just recently was telling me how she became acquainted with Mom when you were sick as an infant, and she, the father of the parish, I think Father Ryan, mentioned to Bobby, go talk with Angela. She might need some encouragement. She might need some friendship. She just might need, and so that's when Bobby was introduced to Mom, and they became lifelong best friends. And it was just interesting to hear. I hadn't heard that story before.
I hadn't either.
Well, she was my godmother.
Oh,
So
okay.
they were all each other's godparents,
Yeah.
and they were all each comadres, compadres.
It was a village
It
that
was
we
a
all grew up
village.
with, one another, and we were part of each other's. And so you're talking about the meal time at home, but there was never a time where we didn't have extra people coming in, partaking of whatever meal we had. And if Mom needed to add some more potatoes or carrots or something to a stew or soup or something, it always fed. It always fed not just us, but it fed anybody
But
else
they
who
also
came
had
through.
the birthday parties at like Uncle Raymond's house that could accommodate the whole big family because they had such a big yard, and
Right.
we would go down there, sometimes have piñatas,
Yeah.
and just the kids. I remember all the kids having, I think, even more fun than the grown-ups.
Oh yeah.
You know, hide and seek and all the
Because they were
simple
too
games.
busy talking politics and arguing about their differences and solving the world problems, and we were just having fun.
And then, of course, the Jaramillos.
Yeah.
You had Ray and Josie from Auntie Fanny's side of the family. They were exciting people.
Yeah.
Very musically inclined.
Very musically
Yes.
inclined. They were talented.
Talented.
And
Lots
they,
of energy.
Oh, tons of energy. And they were always a party looking for a place to happen, And I would go to birthday parties and Ray Jaramillo would be singing and serenading everybody. He just had a great voice, and he was a
Yeah.
showman. And
It was beautiful.
it was a nice.
And all the kids knew how to play guitars or
Yeah.
play some instruments.
None of my
horns
friends can
and
sing with the
saxophones
darn, and I'm always wondering, it's like, boy, all their friends could sing, because it was a part. That's how they grew up. They didn't grow up with a TV, so they sang and they enjoyed each other's company, and that was kind of a special era.
Yeah.
I remember that you don't see much anymore, with friends entertaining each other
Yeah.
like they did.
So in the 70s, Dad left the printing business and decided to go back into engineering. Got relicensed as a chemical engineer and went and worked for the state. Was it the state water department?
No, he worked for a nonprofit,
Nonprofit.
that set up a lot of water and wastewater systems throughout the Valley and into Texas.
Into the small communities that
Small
couldn't
communities
afford.
that didn't
Right.
have water, didn't have drinking water in their homes.
Right.
And so Dad helped establish the water supply, the storage systems, the distribution, the transmission systems for a lot of these small communities. And now these systems have grown, and they're still in existence today.
Wow.
And Dad's helped start about 10 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there was
Yeah.
quite a few.
When
Quite a
Anthony,
few.
All the way from
Center
Elephant
Park,
Butte to
Yeah.
southern New
Yeah.
Mexico.
Chaparral.
Chaparral.
And even when there were, toward the end of his consulting time doing that, they would say, well, we need help doing this, but we might not get paid. We might not get the grant money. We might not. And oftentimes they wouldn't. And he still did it and helped them most of the time for free because it was a value. He saw that they needed to have water, and he had the skills to help them get that. So he would help them get some of that money to be able to build the system. They didn't necessarily have money left over to pay him for his consultation, but it was more important to him to be able to help him out.
And then they moved to El Paso. They moved to El Paso because Dad got a job in industry, pollution control in industry, with General Electric. And General Electric had the twin plants, the maquilas there, in both El Paso and in Juarez, and he would commute to El Paso every day, and then many times into Juarez, and so his work kept him over there quite a bit. And so he eventually moved, Mom and Dad moved to El Paso, and then he also worked for another company called Photon Power as a pollution control engineer, and they produced solar panels. So they were in the green energy development business, and so that was another enterprise that Dad was involved with. A number of other consulting positions before he retired, but he did have a pretty enjoyable career in El Paso. I think the youngest three of us, Maria, Sarah, and Jimmy, all moved to El Paso and graduated from Coronado High School there. And the rest of us all are Cruces Bulldogs.
Ghost dog.
And so Maria and Sarah went to UTEP as they got in-state tuition in Texas, and so they lived with them in El Paso, and then when Mom and Dad retired, they moved back into Jet Street House.
So I'm Claire, like I said, and I'm just going to talk about my family, the George Paz family, our siblings. There's 12 of us. There's 18-year span between the oldest and the youngest, and I happen to be the middle child. 9 years between me and my oldest and me and my youngest, so I claim that as true. George is the oldest. He's a psychiatrist in California. Conchita is a family practice doctor here in Las Cruces. And Angie is a nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner here in Las Cruces, has her own private practice. And then...
You skipped Ricky.
Gosh, Rick, you're standing right in front of me. Richard's number 2 child, second brother, and he's semi-retired in Kansas City. And then Conchita, Angie, and then Eddie is working for Kaiser in, I want to say, computer security.
In Hawaii.
And loves it there.
Rough life.
Yeah, someone has to live there. And then me, I live in Denver, and I'm full-time grandma, and then I do a lot of volunteer work for nonprofits.
But you're a nurse.
I'm a nurse by training, and I just haven't practiced that for a while. Marcos is an industrial engineer. He works in Albuquerque, and I forget exactly which company he's working for now.
I don't know. It keeps changing.
It's changed recently. Jerry is the next one, and he's a civil engineer, builds lots of beautiful bridges here in southern New Mexico, the Dona Ana Bridge and the Missouri Bridge, in charge of the interchange of I-25 and I-10, and also interchange system in Santa Fe. That's recent. So he's a civil engineer. Bobby, Dr. Paz, Robert Paz, is a professor of electrical engineer at NMSU. And then Maria Westbrook, she is a nurse, and she works at a pregnancy center in Indiana. Then Sarah Crippen, she is a teacher in Denver, Colorado. And then Jim, we call him our resident drug pusher because he's a pharmaceutical rep. And, so those are basically the 12 children and we 6 live in New Mexico, and then the other 6 live elsewhere around the country. There's been times where some of us have lived overseas. So every time we talk about our family and the largeness of the family and the influence this family has had, the Gabriel Paz family, people really around the world just marvel, like, not only are we so big, but just the closeness we have and the influence we've had of community service, of serving other people and being involved in the community organizations or the politics, or in some various fashions. So.
I think that when you talk about overseas, let's see, you lived in Kazakhstan.
I lived in Ukraine.
Kiev,
Ukraine.
Maria lived in Kazakhstan doing missionary work. Bobby lived in China. Mm-hmm. Ricky lived in Germany. And
Sarah lived in Mexico for...
Sarah lived in
Mexico.
Mexico.
She was in India for a little bit.
She was in India and Mexico for several months.
Yeah.
Michelle was in
Italy. My daughter, Michelle, was in Italy for 4 years.
We had one of those, what was the name of the family reunion T-shirt we had? Was
Paz Global Domination.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's just the countries we visited, and so we
there was like 37.
Yeah, we covered
countries.
the entire world,
every continent,
and all the hemispheres. I mean, we've spread our wings in terms of at least visiting, but some of them lived for years.
Yeah.
in foreign countries. So and living, but also serving.
Serving.
Yeah.
Right.
Living, and so Ricky was in Germany. He wasn't just drinking good wine over there, which he did quite a bit, but he also was serving his country in the Air Force.
Right.
And so we're proud of him for that. But Maria, serving in missionary work and doing hard work there in Kazakhstan, and Claire in Ukraine, and her husband Keith. And of course, Maria and Brett, they moved their whole family there. The entire family lived there. And Bobby in China, he moved his whole family there. So the family got to experience the various cultures that are out there. So I just lived in Las Cruces my whole life. I'm gonna die here. But it's neat to see our family that spreads out and does things around the world.
It's rewarding to just see the influence that both Dad and Mom had with us, but it extended beyond just our family, the kids, into their community. You know, whether it was Los Pastores or the Sierra Club, or involvement at church, or just every different ways that they served the community, and that rubbed off on all of us, where we in turn wanted to go out and serve our community, whether it was through our profession or whether it was through additional, work with nonprofits or other areas.
And Concha, you're part of the National Hispanic Medical Association,
Right.
As a physician.
As a physician, trying to bring healthcare to Hispanic families. But one of the interesting things in my profession is being able to see how Mom and Dad have impacted other people. For instance, I actually have people that have been in the communities that received that water system that Dad put in, and how helpful it was for them. Some of them even got jobs in some of those water system organizations and were employed by them. So he helped them get their jobs, and they are now retiring.
Wow.
And then Mom, the people that she got jobs for them, they were like always eternally grateful that they were able to
The people I know
get
came up to me
that
and
kind
told
of
me.
that kind of job system that was able to get them health
Retrained
insurance, and their families were taken care of. So those were things that people always ask me about, both Mom and Dad, is how they've been doing and how they helped them out. It was so nice to hear that.
And who knew that this Santos Paz that switched
Nationalities.
switched nationalities,
7
living in the
times.
same place.
7 times. He switched nationalities, but he never moved.
Yep.
He lived,
All that.
his citizenship changed 7 times, and he never moved. So the guy you take your hat off to him, he kind of had to endure all that.
Yeah. And each generation has had their own moves, so to
Moves
speak,
and abilities
that they've had to
and
do.
everything that we've brought in.
Right, and just with Mom and Dad, first generation to go to college and to graduate. They encouraged all of us to go to college and graduate. And so, 12 children, and people are like, oh, your mom must be a saint. And she was.
She was.
She was a saint.
Was.
To put up with us, to put up with Ricky, to put up with Claire. And, I was the easy one, right? But it was a chore, and so they always optimistic. Tomorrow's going to be a great day, and that made it a family thing. But they always encourage us, and I don't remember Dad pushing me. I remember him encouraging me, but I don't ever felt like he was on my back to achieve something. He wanted me to achieve it on my own, and so that was the nice thing about it.
Yeah.
So
Thank you very
grandkids,
much.
what about the grandkids?
There are 33 grandkids. There's some step grandkids in there, so it's hard to kind of remember how many do we have.
And about 15
There's 14
great-grandkids.
great grandkids, and we're waiting on the birth of the latest one.
So
any
George
day.
has 2.
He has
Yes.
one and waiting for one to be born.
Well, he has 2 kids
Oh, 2 kids.
and
Almost two,
and-
one and a half grandkids.
1.5 grandkids, one in the oven.
Yeah.
And Ricky doesn't
Nothing.
have kids. And then Concha, you
I
have
have 2 children and 2 grandkids,
2 children,
and that's it.
And
great
An-
grandkids.
2 great
And
grandkids.
Angie
And
has
Angie has 4 children and 2 grandchildren.
2 grandchildren.
Eddie has 4 children and 4 or 2. No, he has 3 grandchildren.
3 grandchildren.
I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren.
Mark
Mark
has 2 children,
children.
and then he has an adopted girl, and then I have 3 boys and 1 grandbaby, Nora June.
Bobby has 2 boys and no grandchildren, and Maria 4 children and no grandchildren.
Maria's youngest daughter is
16, 17.
Yeah, Christine is 16,
Yeah.
17. So,
And then Sarah has 3 children and
and her youngest son is
12.
12.
11.
No, he just turned 12.
Oh, wow, that's
last
right, just
week.
had his
TJ.
birthday.
Yeah.
So TJ's youngest one of all
Yeah.
are
He's
all the
of
grandchildren.
all the grandchildren. And then Jim is has 2 children,
2 daughters.
2 daughters. And
So when you look at TJ 12 and you look at the kids that are still in high school, I mean, those 14 great grandchildren, they're just getting started. That's just getting started. There's some more that are going to come down the
yeah,
road.
because the oldest grandchild, Helicia, is she's in her 38 or 39.
She's having her first.
Yeah, and she's having her first.
And so one of the family mottos is that we have is what, Ricky?
If you can't beat them, outbreed them.
If you can't beat them, outbreed them. And so there's a graphic that we developed that has a bunch of little bunny rabbits. Dad used to joke about it, about power in numbers, about better representation with larger numbers, and that you had to stake your claim with numbers. And so he came up with this philosophy of life: if you can't beat them, outbreed them. And I guess that's
Well, the other thing is, he wanted to prove that it wasn't cheaper by the dozen.
No, not
And that's why he had 12. He wanted to prove that it wasn't cheaper by the dozen.
I don't know how they made it.
Yeah.
You know, they
With
did-
no twins and all in an 18-year
Twins.
period.
But Mom and Dad managed a budget very tight, very frugally. We didn't have a car. I didn't have a car in high school or in college. You know, and it wasn't until my senior year in college that I had enough money to buy a car. So it was, we had to do it ourselves, and we walked or ride our bike, and there was no frills. Beans, a lot of Mom buy the
Beans and
bands
rice.
by the huge sack, and to last us a while, and then you know, just being frugal with everything. Mom shopped very frugally.
Well, with all the other people that we knew, they also had large families. So, of course, that's the reason we congregated around everybody. So what did you do in this situation? What did you do in that situation?
Yeah.
You know, and because there was another family that had, 13, 14 was the Duddles? They had a
Yeah,
couple of
13.
twins in their family.
Baker's dozen.
Yeah. And then the rest of our families had 8, 9, you know,
Yeah.
bigger than most families are.
And I think on a personal level, Dad passed on a faith to me that I don't know that I appreciated it growing up, but as I got married and had kids, and I reflected back on the things that Dad taught me, I did come to embrace my faith so much more and so much deeper. And I appreciate that guidance he gave. Sometimes you're rebellious growing up and you're not really open to it, but I really appreciated that guidance that Dad had in my life.
Well, he also had his humorous side, where he challenged his grandkids to think outside the box. You know, he didn't want them to be complacent in their thoughts of even simple things like having colored milk. You know, what color milk you want, blue, red, green. You can have whatever color you want. What kind of milk do you want? You want cow milk, lizard milk, snake milk, chicken milk? What kind of milk you want? We have it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a unique brand of twisted humor.
Yeah.
And Ricky, what do you think?
Well, because of that, it rubbed onto me, and I use a lot of that twisted humor. And talking with other little kids, I'm always challenging them to think twice about. Or sometimes I get a word, and I get the other meaning to it, and so I'll use it in a sentence, and then they have to think twice before they can answer the question. And you can see their minds kind of turning and thinking, trying to outthink me. Sometimes they even come back with responses that will, be way ahead of their times. Just it challenges them. I enjoy that.
And I'd like to just wrap up by saying that if our parents are gone, George and Angela are gone, and the Paz legacy will continue on because of what they instilled in us. And if we could live up to the values that they taught us and the ideals that they believed in, this world would be a lot better place.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's about all the time we have with the George Paz family discussion. I'm Jerry Paz on behalf of Claire, Conchita, Richard. Thank you for sharing our story with us. Of course, there's 8 other Pazes that you haven't had a chance to meet, but we thank you for spending this time with us and sharing these memories. Goodbye.